Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Flow State podcast. This is Rajesh and I have a very special guest for you today, Kunal Nandwani. Kunal is the co-founder and CEO of U-Trade Solutions, a global fintech company out of India. U-Trade Solutions provides multi-asset trading software, trading algorithms, and direct market access to both institutions and to retail customers. He is an entrepreneur who has built and scaled multiple ventures across fintech and blockchain space. But in today's episode, we will not talk about crypto or blockchain or trading. Instead, we'll dive deep into his entrepreneurial journey, some pivotal moments that made him start something new, that tested him, and that ultimately led to his success. You'll hear about Kunal's framework of learning and building go together, why selling is about creating and delivering value. And sometimes you need to hear more from your gut or intuition. This is an episode about finding meaning and building, evolving through challenges, and staying motivated and inspired for the long haul. Let's jump into it. Kunal, welcome to the podcast Flow State. It's so pleasure to have you here.
Hi, Rajesh. Good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. I know you and I know each other from quite some time, right? I have seen your books. You have, more importantly for me, like you have built a few companies from U Trade Solutions to Hashful, Co-Identity. But today, what I want to focus on is how you have gone through the entrepreneurial journey, right? And what were some of your personal stories and experiences that helped you kept going during that time, and even they help you right now. It's not about AI, it's not about blockchain, not about algos, but it's more about how Kunal went through those moments and how those experiences essentially shaped you and your company and your colleagues and family, everything. So with that, why don't you give us like a quick 30-second pour from engineering to MBA to until now?
Sure. So I think I did everything the society expects you to do, especially in India. Become a computer science engineer. Then, if you get a job or don't get a job, still go and do an MBA and then work for an investment bank. So you've ticked all the boxes for personal society validation and maybe matrimonial needs, I guess. So did all that for the society or influenced by others without knowing what I truly want, who I truly am or was. So I worked in with some banks for a while. I was based in London, and then I moved back to India and started a company called U-Trade, where we make software for trading in stock markets, algo trading, etc. And that's arguably been a successful company. It's still working after 13, 14 years of starting. We raised some investment initially, make the company survive the first 3 to 5 years, which is the hardest part, and then made it profitable, and then brought in some other strategic investors, gave exit to the early investors, and now we are hopefully going to plan for an IPO in a couple of years. So still going on and still doing well. In between, I looked at other opportunities, other growth opportunities, 5, 6 years into the U-Trade process. So came up with an idea, heard about blockchain, cryptos, tried to build something there. That also did fairly well initially. And, but then later I gave it up sort of because I truly didn't believe that the potential, the technology and the concept of blockchain and cryptos or Bitcoin represented was taken as positively by the industry. It was more used for manipulation. Eventually, just the human vital greed took over and people actually misused it more than actually applied it for the true potential of decentralization and community building, etc., which it was meant to be doing. So I just gave up. I just let it go
Mhm.
eventually in 2, 3 years down the line when it was still doing well. Identity is a third company I started just after Hash Forward during the Hash Forward period. The concept was that the digital identity, our data, our identity that is getting more and more digital is not secure today. It's not
Mhm.
aggregated. It's not organized. So the idea was to aggregate all that, give a sort of a digi-locker to everyone.
Mhm.
And so that we built as a great product. We got like, I think, 40 million downloads.
Mm.
We kept it free initially. We were moving to a freemium model eventually. We didn't want to raise in Cove because I realized that raising money actually, while it helps initially at times, but mostly then you end up in the habit of just raising and burning. You don't really truly
Yeah.
build the product market fit or move towards a client's commercial validation where customer will pay you more than what you're spending to build the product or the service. So we didn't raise in Cove. We fortunately had some budget to invest ourselves, so invested for a few years ourselves. But then we realized that 40 million downloads and hundreds of millions of files on the platform today, even now, nobody wanted to pay $1 for this. Some Google and Facebook and many other internet companies have gotten everyone into the habit of internet being free for you. People are so used to it that when it's free for you, they're happy to be the product. So
Mm.
we have left that platform open. People can come, download, play around, load up to 1 GB data, but then if they don't pay, then they don't pay. So it's sort of lying out there on internet, just like maybe Wikipedia is as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was a Cove company. So yeah, it's been great experience building some of these, building the teams, building the products, coming up with the vision, launching it, commercializing some of them. U-Trade worked out well. We started as a B2B company where we were initially licensing the algo trading or the trading software to the brokers, banks, stock exchanges, hedge
Got
funds,
it.
etc. But then we moved to a B2C model post-COVID,
Mm.
where now we are offering an algo platform on a mobile app to every individual, and now we are enabling it with AI and doing a bunch of things there. It's a great experience of the last 13, 14 years that I've been building these things. Superb learning, came across some great people, learned a hell lot. The biggest thing,
Yeah.
the biggest reason, one of the reasons why I did any of these companies, the first one being U-Trade and the follow-on, was I was just excited to build something which will have of some value, solve some problem and scale. And in the process, irrespective of whether I succeed or not,
Mm.
I would learn. And that's
Yeah.
something that stays with me. Money may come or go, but learning stays with you for life. So that's the biggest takeaway I've had as an entrepreneur. Great
Yeah.
learning, and it evolves you as a person. It's superb learning, and fortunately, with U-Trade success, you get the freedom and the independence, and then you try to figure out some deeper questions, and more meaningful thoughts of life, which I'm trying to sort of go through as a person right now.
I think one thing that I picked up from that was you're a core builder. And I think that's what really resonates with me. Yeah. And I think that's the concept that people don't appreciate enough. Like building itself is a big thing, and that drives you to unknown territories, I guess. Having said that, when you were at BNP Paribas or other firms where you learned more about high frequency trading and everything, what happened during that time that made you jump from working in a good corporate career outside India? And then what made you shift from there to building your own company? Or even did anything help you while working there that you took from there in the startup?
Sure. So after the MBA, I worked in some investment banks in London, and most of my time was spent with a firm called Lehman Brothers. It was an investment bank which eventually went under. Probably the best experience of my career at that time. It was a very high profile, high stake, exponential growth investment bank where it's highly competitive and you're competing with the best in the world and you're trying to do certain things around trading, algo trading, investing. So I learned most of that over there. Had a great role, did not have a very restrictive role, I had a very wider, bigger role. So, which was product building only primarily, working with sales, working with technology teams internally. So, learned tremendously there. What happened was in 2008, 15 September, when Lehman went under, Lehman filed for bankruptcy. All the Lehman team was taken over in Europe by a Japanese bank called Nomura. Culturally, Japanese firms were a little slower than American firms generally to move. But also, more importantly, since 2008, a crisis, the financial global crisis meltdown, the regulators became very strict and did not let any of the banks build any fancy products, any new products, any
Yeah.
innovation. So everything slowed down dramatically. It moved, imagine it was moving at a very fast, high speed rocket between 2004 to 8 when I was working there. And then after 8, it moved like glacially slow, just a snail pace. So it was not aligning with my personal being. I was not learning. I was not growing. paid a hell lot. It is like any good corporate well-paying job in an investment bank or a corporate or a consulting. What they give you is essentially a golden handcuff. It is golden because it's a lot of money, but it's a handcuff because it ties you down from following your own dreams, right? So I was not feeling comfortable in the shackles over the 2 years because I was not learning. So I realized it took me a couple of years. I started looking around since 2008 only for other business ideas. I looked at like any business idea to anything. First thing I did, I left my job because I realized while I'm in my job, my monthly salary paycheck is not letting me really focus on building something or coming up with a new startup idea or starting something. I realized if I don't get paid at the end of the month, I'll be forced to do something because
So
otherwise
you
every
burned the
month,
bridge.
yeah. So I burned the bridge. I was like, you have to, nothing happens in a comfort zone. I was in a comfort zone, right?
That's
I was
right.
paying well, I was paid well. I was thinking of an idea every month and then it won't work at the end of the I'll say, okay, we'll see next month. And then it kept on going for a few months. And then I realized, what if I stop this? What if I burn this bridge? And I did that. And in 3 months, 2, 3 months after that, when I was still in resignation, I came up with this idea of building, because I'd seen some trading softwares and some part of technology, algo trading in Europe. I happened to be visiting India back home with my family in Chandigarh in India, in North India. Met a stockbroker and told them we do algo trading, high frequency, dark pools, this, that, very fancy and very complex and interesting products that how trading happens in Europe. And
Hmm.
they said, well, if in India you can build a basic click trading software and
Yeah.
that works, it'll be a big deal because India doesn't have it. Now that was a throwaway comment from someone, and I was not even seeking it from that person. I was seeking other ideas with other people in other sectors because you tend to take your own domain for granted, and you feel that
That's
okay,
true.
somewhere else it's better. Grass is greener on the other side. So I was looking at grass somewhere else, but then that a person I randomly met, I was not even willing to meet. I just ended up meeting and gave this throwaway comment that even if you do a basic click trading software in India, you could do very well. And then I realized that that's a that throwaway comment stuck with me. And then that was the seed of the idea, which eventually grew as a tree of trade. So yeah, so that's how the migration from a well-paying job or a comfort zone to a completely crazy place called
Yeah.
startup happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I picked up from there was being a good learner is really important before you become a builder. And I think the way you said it, you were not learning enough. So probably that was the first trigger that made you think like, I need to learn more. And obviously, when you're building something, you just learn a ton of. So I felt like continuous learning is something that people who are eventually builders are craving for all the time. Right?
Sure.
Good, good, good.
Yeah. Yeah. And the learning doesn't happen in comfort zone. You have to move out of the comfort zone. So, if you
Totally.
keep doing what you're doing, eventually it'll slow down and eventually either you get comfortable with no learning or low learning, or you would have to move around and do something else, something bigger, something different. So yeah, I hope it continues and I keep learning something and I keep the desire for it and the energy to keep going.
Okay. So you started U Trade when you came to India, and a random meeting, helped you kickstart that. That probably wasn't the thing a lot of people sometimes imagine that, like, oh, there must be a cataclysmic event that might have pushed you there. And sometimes it's just a small random event that just, influenced you along the way. Were you starting alone, or did you find a co-founder, or maybe what, talk about some initial things that were challenging.
Yeah. I mean, seems like a long time ago and I've not spoken about startups and entrepreneurship in the last 5, 6 years or 4, 5 years. I think since COVID, I don't think people call me for that anymore. They used to. I got bored. They got bored, and I moved on to more things and other things. But yeah, it's coming back. And thanks for asking. It's good memories I can share. So yeah, so I was in London when I had left my job, but I was meant to get a British passport. So I thought I'll wait for that. So I stayed there a few more months. In the process, started building a business plan. I started talking to people in UK to learn about India, then went to India to learn about India, etc. Started meeting some customers, just whatever data I could analyze and gather, right, as a good pre-analysis process. Though I was convinced I'm going to do it. Now, thing was how to do it, where to start, what to do, etc. In the process, I knew I was lacking a tech co-founder because I was not a coder, though I had a computer science engineering background. But like majority computer science engineers in India know nothing about computer science besides rebooting the computer if anything goes wrong, right? So I was of that category. So I knew I need,
That's a little bit of controversial statement.
look, here's how this works. If I'm a computer science engineer, I make a joke about computer science. Nobody can call me racist or anything about the category. I'm entitled to do that, right? Same thing goes with a stand-up comic. If he's a Jew, he can make Jewish jokes, right? So I can say this, controversy or not, I can say this. I do have a degree. The least we learned was how to make jokes in the college. So I knew I needed a tech co-founder, and I was only thinking for one. So I started talking to one of the best computer science programmers in my college with whom I'd worked. He was working somewhere else
Our
doing some
college together,
our
Punjab
college.
Engineering
Yes, sorry.
College.
We are from the same college, different batch, but we are from the same college. Yes. So one of my batchmates, I remembered, I reached out to him. He said, yeah, we'll meet. I couldn't say it in so many words. So I was in London. He was a good friend. I would see him once in 2, 3, 4 years. I'd not seen him in 4, 5 years, I think. But when I had this idea, I gave the first call to him or message to him, and we started speaking. And I said, look, I'm thinking about this. This is the idea. He said, okay, evolve it and we'll talk again. Then I evolved it further and wrote down the full business plan. What is a competition, go to market strategy? How are we going to build? How are we going to sell? What are we trying to do? Where the world is going? What will we be doing 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line, etc. Uh, a few months later, I was in India visiting from London. And I met this friend whom I wanted to bring in as tech co-founder. He almost agreed. He said, I think it sounds good. I'm also bored of my corporate job. I've been doing it for 7, 8 years now. I would also be happy to do something new. This is my monthly cost, if bare minimum you can help cover initially. I can't invest or anything. So I was personally investing and I was taking no salary for the first 3 years. I had saved enough, sort of. So I said, yeah, I'll take care of it. Don't worry. We'll figure it out. And then he said, yeah, mostly I'm in, but we'll figure out the details. So he signed on. He was the first tech co-founder, one guy called Harvinder. Then I went back to London, and there I had a friend who used to work for Morgan Stanley, another bank, and he was a tech investment banker. So he used to help raise money for the corporate deals of whatever tech companies typically. So he and I were good friends. We used to hang out in the evening, have some drinks and cigars and stuff. The usual habits of bankers, I guess, to have fun of sorts. So we were hanging out, and I told him I'm looking to go back to India and start this, and he was quite surprised, pleasantly surprised, and rather happy. And he said, "Look, I'm also getting bored of the corporate job. Again, same thing. When you're
Yeah.
working since 20s at 30s, you'll start feeling what's really I'm doing, right? So there's no further growth. The steep learning curve starts to stagnate and saturate and mature. So he said, I can also consider joining you. Now, I
Hmm.
was not looking for him as such, good friend, but as a friend, you have to bring some value. So I said, so we tried to figure out, and then I realized that he can, because in startups, you have to raise a lot of money, you have to deal with a lot of investors, you have to manage your finances, etc. So I thought he could play the CFO role. Why not? So brought him in also as a co-founder and CFO. Also moved to India from London. He had a French wife. She also moved, so it was more hard for them. And for her, I think, to adjust back in India. For Indians to come back to India, it's relatively more known and they at least understand it. But for a European to move to India with a boyfriend is not easy. So, but she also moved. So yes, they joined, and then just 2, 3 months before we were moving and starting, shared this with that I'm moving to India and one of our friends is joining as CTO, Chief Technology Officer. Just want to share. We'll catch up when I'm in India, etc. Sent it to some of my batchmates, and one of them said, "Why didn't you ask me?" I was also keen. I was like, "You're so keen. Maybe you can come." And he was also a great programmer. And I said, "Why don't you come back? Why don't you also join in? We'll have 2 tech co-founders. More the merrier." And besides everything else, that the value they bring and the friends I know and the good coders that they were, so we ended up being 4 co-founders. So I think it's hard to do it alone. At least one co-founder I needed. Ended up getting 3, and it worked out fairly well for all of us. You want to work with co-founders who bring some skills on the table or complementary skills to yours. You want to work with people whom you can trust, especially when times are bad, because the last thing you want is anybody new you meet, you don't have a comfort or relationship or trust, or it takes time to build, and you don't know how they act or react in bad times. Good times, everyone's your friend. And in startups, you'll have more bad times than not. So that way, I think I got lucky that I ended up having 3 great co-founders, and dear friends who are still friends.
Okay. So you mentioned that there are more bad times than good times, at least in the initial stages.
Hmm.
So in terms of great times, yes, the team is more stable. You guys are looking at the IPO path. Great. What were the near crisis moments you saw during that time, and how did you guys pull off?
So we had few of them, few such moments that lasted from the first few years to even the 10th year. So initially, the first 1 to 3 years, it is we're building a product, we're trying to sell, then we make some small revenue, but then we have to build more and we have to hire more people. So you're constantly trying to manage the funds you have and the value you can create versus the valuation of the company and the funds you can raise. And because the customer money comes in later in a product business, it is sort of an enterprise product you trade. So 12 months in, we had raised 500,000. We had built some products. We had started selling, but we we never had to more than 2, 3 months of runway in our account. So we were constantly raising or we were constantly trying to get from client money. Now, client money is not easy to come by. It takes time. In countries like India, it's really hard. I mean, look, being a startup entrepreneur is difficult everywhere in the world. If you're doing a job, your job difficulty level is X. Startup entrepreneur level is 10X. If you're doing it in India, it's 100X.
Yeah,
I'm not
I,
exaggerating by a single bit.
I heard about that, and I
Yeah.
mean,
So
I've seen that personally, felt that.
I'm saying this with real experience and no exaggeration virtually. So 12 months in, we were out of money. So we had to raise from the initial investors. They ended up investing. Took us 2, 3 months of negotiation, valuations, etc. We ended up doing it. I think 3 years later, we were making some revenue, but the revenue was not consistent. So we had some money come in, which will keep us going, and then some not. 3 years later, 2011 to 2014, I remember, we had a period when we had probably 2 months of salaries of 30 to 40 people we had expanded to. Because the harder thing is, it is like, I don't know if you know the game Whack-A-Mole. It is like you have to keep hiring, you have to try to keep selling, you have to try to keep raising money, you have to try to keep managing your bank account, etc. So something will break. And then suddenly you have
Yeah.
to just manage that or this or that. So you have to essentially, in our business, at least had to raise or sell more, etc. So it took us time. 2014, I remember we got to a point we knew we would need close to, I think the amount was not too much, maybe 150, $200,000 or something to survive the next 3 to 6 months to get to a break-even point. We ended up raising from an investor. I went to see the investor in Hong Kong. The investor gave me a check, personal check, brought the check to India, and he messaged me, please hold on, don't deposit the check. Now,
Okay.
I didn't know what went on in his head. Maybe he was checking about us. Maybe he wasn't sure. Maybe he had second thoughts. Maybe he had some liquidity issue. I have no idea. And he's not my friend. I've met him only twice. So we've spoken only 3 times. I didn't know what to do. I have a choice. I could still deposit the check and say, sorry, it was already gone and it's gone through.
Yeah.
I could do that, right? Because I do it. If he hasn't stopped the check, it'll go through. Money comes to my bank. And then I'll say, whatever your doubts are, we can clear. But I'm sorry, but this transaction has gone through. You've signed the agreement. You've given me the check. It was mine to deposit.
Hmm.
But I still I didn't feel that was the right thing to do. I didn't deposit. So for a month, we co-founders had by then all were taking salaries. We had to hold our salaries. We had to hold some payments. We had to somehow, I think we borrowed from someone to pay the salaries of a month for a month. I remember I used to play, my only let out in the whole time was a badminton. So I used to play badminton at the time and my racket broke and I couldn't buy a new racket. It didn't cost more than, let's say, 10,000 rupees.
Hmm.
I could buy maybe, but I just held on. I was not sure because I ran out of money and my company was running out of money. And the last thing you do is you start still buy things that can maybe wait a month. So for a month, I didn't have a rack. Just, so just adding some
Hmm.
masala to the story of sorts. So for a month, we had to hold back. And then a month later, the guy messaged me himself one day and said, yeah, it's okay, just deposit. Now, maybe he was running out of money. Maybe he had second thoughts. Maybe he wanted to cancel the deal. I don't know. I
Hmm.
never asked. We never know. So there was a moment this happened that I remember the story in 2, 3 ways. I had got the check from Hong Kong. I didn't buy the racket and he said, don't deposit the check. So that was quite a dramatic story at the time for us, which is still a mini story in kind of things. But yeah, we were close to running out of money. So every year I had to bring in a big client. 2016 we did that. 2018 we brought in an Indian client. 2019 we brought in an Indian stock exchange. 2020 we brought in some. Then 2020 COVID hit. Some of our
Mm,
big clients pulled back. So we had to like really hold the appraisals for the team members, had to shrink the team, realign them. And by then we had become like 120, 130 people or so, slightly bigger. We never wanted to be more than 100. We had to realign somehow. But then 3 to 6 months post COVID, we got another big client. So everything fell in place. But yeah, we had these moments every year, some small
mm,
mini moments where we are running out of money, but didn't get this close since 2014. And then 2020 was a slight shocker when some big things changed. But yeah, that's how the startup goes. So that game of whack-a-mole keeps going for as long as the startup keeps going. Survival is not a question anymore. But yeah,
uh-huh.
how big can we become? And that's what we are trying in. So we've evolved the business model from B2B to B2C, which is a bigger market space, but needs 5 years of core investment and a lot of buildings.
Seems like there was always some burn that you need to go
Yeah,
raise or get more client. As simple as that,
correct.
right?
Correct.
That was more on the funding side, but was there any time in this, was there any self-doubt, criticism, skepticism from the team internally, or sometimes it just happens to yourself? Like, okay, I've been here for almost a decade. How to get out of that? Did you feel that?
Yeah, this came many times. This came many times from investors because after 5 years, investors start asking, when do we get the next round or
Yeah,
when do we get our exit? So fifth to 10th year, I had to deal with that. I told them I can give you some small exit slowly if you like, or otherwise big exit may happen when it will happen, but we are still slowly growing. It takes time,
takes some.
at least in the kind of business we were in. So investors would rightfully ask what's theirs, but I had no answer. Sometimes you yourself would think, look, I've spent 10 years, where am I? I'm still at times just breaking even, slightly positive, not making enough, not making personally what I was making 10 years ago.
Mhm.
I have equity of a company which may be
Yeah,
valued at its notion, but it's a notional number. There's no exit. There's not enough liquidity to sell. Whom do I sell to, right? I'm the largest shareholder. So yeah, you realize that. And then people around have made more money. Some businesses have started much later than ours, but much simpler, but much less complex, or have raised more or have become more successful. So you keep these doubts do come. Your family also says how long you want to run it, what do you want to do, because it's a exponential thing, but a hockey stick is very flat for a long time. So yeah, so doubts come. It came many times. Many times I wondered if I've done the right thing, but it came back to the basics. Look, I wanted to do this. I'm happy
yeah.
I'm doing this. One, I would not want to do it and regret I had this idea and I didn't execute on it. Right? That's the
Mm.
biggest one big milestone that stays with me. Second, learning has been tremendous. I was always maturing, coming up with new ideas, looking at world and businesses and people differently. So yeah, so somewhere I was trying to, and then lastly, what kept me going, I think biggest was the stakeholders. The stakeholders are the clients who bought the software on my promise. There are
Mhm.
employees who've come to the company because I've told them we will provide you the best environment we can, good learning, great experience, good compensation, etc. Then there are investors who invest on my pitch, right? So all that, just I thought I have to keep going. I can't give up because I did have the energy, fortunately, but I just
Mhm.
said I have to keep going for them. And then since COVID, things changed in some sense that personally I stopped traveling and then I tried to figure out more deeper questions of life, which brought me to a different part of the journey now, which is less entrepreneurial but more personal, inwards looking. And then in between, this deal happened, and where we gave exit to everyone. So everyone was happy and personal mates a bit, and then got a path to a larger, bigger story. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So
well
there was
sorted.
a framework that you were using to remind yourself about, like,
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot, and if I were not to do this, I would be regretting, and I don't want to be in a position where later in my life, I would say, like, I should have hung on to that one, right? So there is always some sort of framework, right? Am I
So
exaggerating, or am I saying it right?
yeah, it's a framework now looking back. At that time, it wasn't a framework in my head. These were random thoughts scattered. Now I'm connecting the dots. Now I'm able to articulate this and put it as a framework, and you may call it a framework, and it's the right thing. But at that time, it was not a framework. It was just that I have a bad thought or a bad action or comment from someone,
Yeah.
and I sleep over it, and next day I have to keep going. I can't stop.
Yeah.
I have enough stakeholders. I have to keep going. That was it. Now, of course, looking back, I'm just reminding myself and, maybe ending up formulating a framework, which actually is a framework in some sense. But at the time, I was not that analyzing it too much. I was not over analyzing it. I was like, I have to keep going. I can't stop.
Yeah, you're in the middle of the action. You can't give
Yeah.
up, right?
Yeah. It's like, you are the doer, you are the Arjuna in the battlefield. Without inner voice, you have to keep going. You can't stop.
Yeah. I think you also mentioned like you played badminton. Was there anything else that was helping you with the burnout or anything?
Yeah. Yeah. I played bunch of sports. I would play badminton at times initially, then we played tennis. I constantly played over the last 14 years, golf over the weekends at times, most times. So golf was very meditative for me in the sense that
Mm,
I would not take my phone to the golf course. So I had 4 or 5 hours I'd be in the golf course and with myself and my friends and my golf and nature and everything. That's some of the best times because then you can really let go of your any negative energies, any bad thoughts across the week you might have accumulated, and it's a cleansing exercise of sorts. That was a great meditative exercise for me of sorts without knowing it is meditative, but it was just really helping me
mm,
rejuvenate somehow. And I was traveling like 10 to 15 days a month, so
mm.
anywhere in India or outside India, I'd just pick up the flight and go just because I knew I had to keep selling and bridging that burn or bridging the annual subscriptions and I was the best or the free sales guy in the company, right? And, so yeah, so I had to keep doing this because without the sales coming in, we would not survive. So
I think you just mentioned like you were selling a lot. And I know you were an engineer, right? We're all from the same engineering college. You did an MBA, but was there anything that you picked up in the sales process that, hey, I was not thinking about how to sell this? Again, I'm a framework guy. Was there any framework that helped you either at that moment or on the hindsight that you can think of?
yeah, so I don't think there's any framework. I don't think engineering taught me any sales. I was always good at talking to people, being the one who would tell the jokes, get the people together, like public speaking of sorts in mini
Yeah,
groups, of our college and stuff.
yeah,
I was entrepreneurial in college also. I used to, and like we would say that, okay, we're gonna build t-shirts for Peg Fest, our annual festival, and we'd
correct.
build the t-shirts, we'll customize them, print them, and then sell off to people and then make some money in the process. So I was doing some trading here or there. I used to make, then when the CD writers came in late 90s, early 2000s, I'd write CDs and MP3 music and then copy it and buy a CD for 50 rupees and then sell it for 100 instead of 150. That was the price in the market. There's always arbitraging of sorts. So I was doing bit of
Uh,
sales among people I knew, but never mis-selling.
yeah.
I was clear on that. I don't want to mis-sell someone that they feel, okay, you've cheated me or it wasn't for 150 in the market and you sold me for
Mm,
160. No, I was always trying to give some value to everyone. So that was probably the entrepreneurial spirit or the value creation in the sales
value
process I did a
creation.
bit. That was in the DNA somewhere, I guess, which I started from school registers to college, bunch of things with it. Small things, small amounts were just side bets for your pocket monies and stuff, right? And when I started building U-Trade, before that also in Lehman and some of the banks, I used to deal with clients for whom we were building some products or platforms or offering some services. I'd
Hmm.
interface with clients. I'd see the sales guys. There were some sales guys. There's a sales guy named Richard Walker. He taught me also a bunch of rules that I still remember.
Hmm.
Basic things like think about what is a customer's next best alternative. What would they do if
Mm,
they were not doing something with you? Can you be on the point and help them make the decision without selling? So I learned the best sales is not where you don't sell. You just go and have a chat. And in the chat, you
hmm.
stay so genuine and honest and authentic that you are, and you have enough content that people want to work with you rather than you
Yeah.
trying to sell them something they may not need. So the initial years of sales at U-Trade, I'd go to clients, I'd tell them what we're doing, I'd understand their problems. And if I don't have a product market fit for them, or if I don't have a great improvement on their current product, I'll not sell. I'll just
Mm,
say, let's stay in touch. In future, if you need something, reach out. Happy to have your acquaintance. Thanks for your time. That's it. I'd not sell at times.
mm,
I never missold. I never sold at a wrong price. I never sold where there was no value. I did not. And where there was, I just offered them. If you need, we can help. So that was a very indirect and constructive sales process rather than just overselling where how transactional sales guys typically work. So yeah, so somewhere sales part of me was very constructive. I learned bunch of things at Lehman. Learned bunch of things growing up while I was doing things, and somewhere the integrity was always embedded through our upbringing that never do the wrong thing. So because of that, always kept good reputation and tried to do as well as we could on our promises and the delivery and everything, even in the complex, ever-changing regulatory and other environments. Yeah, so sales, I don't think I learned an MBA at all. Maybe there's something in between there, but mostly just be authentic, understand what people want. Can you help them?
Yeah.
If you can't, just walk away. Don't oversell. So yeah, so that's how I think my sales learnings came and executed in the U-Trade days.
Yeah. Sometimes it might seem like a more philosophical approach, but sales process is always thought of as if you're trying to squeeze more than you are giving.
Hmm.
But I think the way you were saying is value creation is something that if you can convince about the value creation and that gets transferred is very important.
Yeah,
Maybe now this is a more rapid fire section, Kunal, and I'm trying a few things. So
go on.
maybe a book that you would recommend or you got inspired or motivated in your time that you think now everyone should read.
So the first book that inspired me that I still remember is The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari by Robin Sharma. His transformation journey from being a lawyer to a monk and how life becomes. Beautifully written book. I read it. I loved it. And the most recent book I got most inspired by is a book by a gentleman named Partho, and it's called Somewhere Among the Stars. It's a spiritual fiction that talks about love story of a Vedantin, a person who's following Vedanta and she's in love with Sri Krishna, one of the Indian godheads. And it's a beautiful book, and it talks about what spiritually is possible, how you can go inwards and actually achieve the consciousness of the universe and bunch of things. So the divine moments and all. So it's a beautiful book. So that's the one I keep reading many times. That's the one I've read most number of times, Somewhere Among the Stars. I love that.
Okay.
But yeah, so Partho's Somewhere Among the Stars and
Okay.
originally The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari,
Got it.
25 years are the two best books I've come across.
Awesome. Any role model who inspired you earlier or inspires you now?
So I think I was quite fascinated by Steve Jobs. I heard a lot of his talks and his product launches, but Steve Jobs, I think, was one of the highly inspiring figures for me in terms of building a consumer product and great tech consumer brand, Apple, and things he used to say, like being an entrepreneur is a crazy thing. Why do you want to do it? You have to be crazy to be an entrepreneur. Um, bunch of things he said, and I was mostly inspired by him. I think Steve Jobs was my inspiration.
Okay. One daily ritual or routine that helps you or keeps you sharp.
So I like having a coffee every day, at least a cappuccino, and I go for a walk, morning or evening or both. That helps you relax and just keep going, I guess.
Yeah. Walking, I think it helps you spend more time with yourself. I found that you have written a few books, right? Maybe can you talk more about the books that you are writing nowadays or that you have written?
Sure. So I wrote three books. First one was on blockchain and future of internet. It's called Squaring the Blockchain Circle. This was in 2016 or 2017 when blockchain was becoming big, and I felt I understood it and I could describe it better. And what I wrote in the book was primarily how blockchain is a great concept, why it's not going to work the way people are trying, because they are
Mm-hmm.
trying to use their decentralized technology and
Mm-hmm.
centralize the decision making. It's like the example I gave maybe publicly somewhere also or in the book also was that it's like North Korea decides to go democratic from tomorrow and their dictator is the only one voting. That's what people are doing. They're not truly decentralizing it. They're wasting it. So, and where it may work in the future when technology takes over, robots take over, etc. So I hinted on AI robots in that book in 2017 when AI was not really in our
Yeah.
day-to-day lives yet at the level where it
Only
is.
only with Chat GPT people started to know, yep, that
Yeah.
is the AI,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's 2022, November, December, whenever it happened,
Correct.
right? So, second book I wrote was 2019, I think. It's called Socialpreneur, where I talked about, there are a lot of entrepreneurship books. I had some decent experience in entrepreneurship by then. But I thought that people are just building things for the sake of building and they have no inspiration. They're not truly motivated. They don't have an idea what they're doing. And they're not really solving the problems that need solving in the world. So the idea of the book was to be an entrepreneur, but might as
Mhm.
well do it. Even if you succeed or fail, probability is only 1% of you surviving or succeeding. But might as well do it in the area where the problem needs solving. So as an example,
Mm.
after we end our call in the next few minutes, let's say it's 6:30 p.m. in India, I don't want that I don't click on a button and then Uber comes here. I don't necessarily, it's not my problem to get an Uber before I finish my call. So
Mhm.
7 p.m. I can be elsewhere. So essentially they're solving a problem that I don't have to click even once, right?
Mm.
It's like, so people are generally in the startup world, especially in Silicon Valley also and many other parts. People take a problem that doesn't exist or that is
Mm.
not a big enough problem or that is not even anybody's problem. It's only good to have. It's a multivitamin. It's not a painkiller. And
Yeah.
then they spend all their lives and they raise bunch of money and waste efforts, right? That's a collective human wastage in my mind. So I was trying
Mhm.
to write on what are the problems that actually need solving. So that was Sociopreneur, the second book. The third one I wrote was in 2023. It's on AI and future of humanity. So there I'm talking about three technologies, AI being the overarching one,
Mhm.
how it's transforming everything because now we have a technology which is smarter than the smartest human on the planet
Mhm.
and how it's growing exponentially and fast. Now AI is here and now you converge it with quantum computing or the advanced computing. You bring
Mhm.
in the virtual reality, metaverse kind of technologies. These three combined are going to dramatically transform everything from here on over the next 5 to 10 years and beyond. The life as we know it would change. People would not be able to do jobs. The society would evolve. Everything has to evolve. So I
Yeah.
wrote on that. And then the last chapter, second last chapter was the one where I addressed a bigger, deeper question, which even Silicon Valley guys or some of the brightest minds keep debating on what would humans do when machines do everything. So the answer I found after a lot of thought process and flow was that we have to go spiritual or we have to go inwards because in the outer world, everything will be digitized away in some sense and would
Mm.
not be needed to do the day-to-day stuff. So yeah, so that's the book called Techtopia, AI and Future of Humanity.
So seems like you already have lined up probably the fourth book. When you go inside or more inwards, what happens then?
Yeah.
Or am I just giving another idea?
Maybe you are. I've thought over it, but so far I don't have the firm idea what I want to write and if I want to write at all. But right now, it's all about going inwards and figuring a bunch of things out.
I go through all of your episodes. They are great. They make you think more, contemplate more, and essentially think about how you would put them into practice. And that's what I get from your podcast with Sparto.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank you.
one last thing, like if you were to give some advice, some suggestion to anyone who is learning and building, what would that be?
In context of a startup, you mean?
Yes, in context of a startup doing something in the world, what would that be?
So I can share two things. One is since I do some startup investing, one thing I've seen in people is very common is that they want to do a startup not because it's their inner voice, not because it's their true motivation, not because the passion is there. They just want to do it because they believe it can work and they will make money or they'll get famous. That is a true because and it's very simple to do. First principle thinking. Somebody comes and says, I want to do this. I say, why? He says, because it's a problem. I said, why do you care? And because I saw it and I want to solve it. Why do you want to solve it? And they haven't thought it further through. This is actually somebody else's idea or some newspaper article or somebody else's life they're going to live into the hardest thing that a man can do in some sense. And 99% they're going to fail and struggle and they will shut down and throw in the towel as soon as the going gets rough. And I tell them, don't do it for the wrong reasons. Do it for the right reasons. Figure out what the reasons are. And what's right for me may be wrong for you. What's right for you may be wrong for me. But truly build something that your inner voice tells you. Do not do it because it's because you saw somebody making money in e-commerce, because you saw Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg. They are exceptions. They are not the
The
rule.
norm.
And the norm is that you will lose out. So the first thing I tell people is don't do entrepreneurship because it's really hard. Only do it if you're really, really, really motivated and sleep over it for a number of days and it still keeps coming back. And it's not just a mental your mind trying to convince you into doing it and you are just manipulated by influenced by the capitalistic world which always wants you to do certain things. Don't do it for those reasons. That's the number one thing I tell entrepreneurs. Please do it if you're really motivated. Otherwise, understand, do you accept 3 years later you're going to be shut down? You're not going to have
Mm.
made money. You would have had sleepless nights. You would have been the punching bag for your clients, investors, employees, everyone. You want to do it. Think again, 3 years. Not everyone is built for that. Not everyone's prepared for that. I went through it. And if you ask me, even after a very decent exit, if you ask me, would I do it again? I will not, in my right mind. It was
Mm.
way too hard. Even if I have to rewind the clock and know the outcome, I don't think I can live those 10, 12, 15 years again the same way. I can't.
Mm.
So that's the number one thing. Don't be an entrepreneur for wrong reason. Do it for the right
Mm.
reason. You have to be very motivated to keep going. That's the number one thing.
Yeah.
Number two is also similar, not about entrepreneurship. Do what your heart tells you. Do what your inner voice tells you. You have intuition. You have your gut.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to it. Give up the social media. Give up the phones. Give up the distraction. Give up the noise. Start becoming quieter. Your inner voice will tell you everything what you're meant to do. That is what your true being is. And what
Mm.
your being is, if you try to do that, what you hear from inwards, you do it outwards, you live in a much better harmony, much better balance, and you'll be way happier. It may or may not make you money, it may or may
Mm.
not pay the bills you are trying to just pay by doing a bad job, but it will be the most peaceful thing you need, and you will just flow. You will just flow so beautifully that how you're meant to live your life. So listen to your inner voice, find silence and quietude and for that, and it will tell you what is there for you to do.
Yeah.
Everyone can be different, and that's okay. You're not here to figure anyone else out. You're here only to figure yourself out. Find time
Yeah.
for it. That's the only
Yeah.
second thing.
On that note, it was great having you here, Kunal. I learned a lot. Everyone here on the podcast would learn a lot. So thank you for your time, Kunal. Thank you.
Thanks, Rajesh. Good speaking to you.
Definitely.